Hey guys, the name is Kris Barocsi. Welcome to Comment Time 15. This is my Q&A series where I try to answer and react to as many comments as I can. If you enjoy my videos, please hit subscribe and ring the notification bell. And if you give this video a like, I'd really appreciate that. Let's get into the first comment, which is from Petar Yonkov. Kris, how about the crazy custom build by Luthier guitars versus one of these? He's talking about this guitar, the video I made on my 58 reissue custom shop Les Paul. I tend to be a fan of luthiers over factories because it's a more intimate feeling. You get to know the guy and spec out whatever you want. Also, there is always the possibility to go and complain, if any of course, about QC issues straight at the source. Anyway, that one is a keeper for sure. Take it easy and rock on. Thanks a lot, Petar. I do believe that both have to exist. We need small companies like small workshops and private luthiers, and the big companies' custom shops as well, because we all need different things. One would say, I only pay that much money for something where I know that the value stays pretty stable, like the resale value or just the value of the instrument really. That's where you really want to go for bigger names. And then there are people who want the personal experience, the personal connection to the brand or the maker, the luthier, whatever the situation is. And I absolutely understand that. That's why I also prefer smaller brands. We're talking about amps or pedals or even guitars, of course. I mean, there you go. This is my PJD guitar. It's a really small company from York in England, and they make incredible guitars. This is an offset body guitar, the St. John model, and it's so different than like a Fender would be. Like Fender would make their original offset designs in a very traditional way, which is awesome. But if you want something else that has the same sort of visual direction, but still very different and plays different and sounds different and has a different, different hardware, different pickups. It's so good to have smaller companies and luthiers who will be open for everything. And you can tell, like, I want a P90, 5 of those in them, or I don't know, whatever you prefer. If you want the traditional tone, I think it's a good idea to stick to the big brands. But if you're just looking for something that's basically a piece of art and is built perfectly and has crazy details and sounds perfect and everything, you don't have to stick to the big brands. All right, I received a comment on one of my old videos, which was interesting. This is the Squier bass modifying video series, this pink one. That one, yeah. I'll put the series, or at least the first part, in the description box. You can check it out in case you missed it. This is from Grandiose Designs. Man, that bass looks sick AF. Did you get some inside info on how to do that? Being you probably got connections having the channel. I know a few people at the Fender custom shop, for example, Mike Lewis, who's the I think, the vice president of the product development. So he's way up at the custom shop. And also Carlos Lopez, one of the master builders at Fender Custom Shop. I got to interview them and have a good talk and everything. But honestly, even if we were best friends, they would not let me know how they relic their instruments. They have their secrets, and every company does. Most of them will never show you how they age instruments. Everything I did on the bass, in terms of finishing and relicking and everything, I figured out myself, or I was talking to some luthiers at Thomann who I learned a lot from. And since I was so obsessed with this, refinishing my instruments with way thinner finish and nitro finish, I just went for it. I tried it out. I know that with just 2 simple tools, maybe 3 very simple tools, those which you can see in the series if you watch it, you can get really, really close to the real use and wear on actual old instruments. Next one is about effects loops, which is a pretty interesting subject here. It's from Håkan Kilbach. Thanks for the great video. I have a question about the effects loop. You said in that video, the 5 things you should know about amps video, that some amp brands or models also distort the power section and the effects loop. If you don't want that to happen, how do you then know what brand or models of that brand that don't do that? How do you find out that information, look for, or do you have to deep dive into the manual? Is there a rule for this, like more clean amps or distorted or 1 or more channels? Thanks, Kris. I learned so much from your videos. Thank you very much. There are some amps that have to distort in the power amp section to give you that tone that you're looking for. Let's say Vox amps. If you want an AC30 or 15 to have that tone, why most people would want to have a Vox AC amp, the power amp section has to distort. So even if Vox or any other brand makes an amp like this with an effects loop, they will most probably distort as well, because the power section sits after the effects loop. So as far as I'm concerned, it's nearly impossible to build a Vox AC type amp with an effects loop that's not distorting your effects in that loop. Same occurs to all Marshall Plexi kind of amps. So even if it's from Marshall, or like the Victory Sheriff, which is an amp I used to own and I loved it, but I couldn't use the effects loop. There was no way I could like put in a clean boost for my solos to make my solos more loud, because if you turn on like a 5 dB clean boost, you will just get more dirt because the power amp is also distorted. Like with this Victory Sheriff I was able to use my delay pedal in the effects loop. It sounded okay. It sounded saturated and a bit more gritty, but it worked. So it's usable, but you have to be aware of this fact, and you have quite a number of limitations of using an effects loop like this. If you have a more modern amp where the preamp saturation is way more important and plays a way bigger role in the tone than the power amp saturation, that's going to be your safest bet. Now, of course, you can use a Vox or a Marshall Plexi clean. If you don't crank them and don't go over the headroom limit, you're good. You can use any of your effects, and you can, if they have an effects loop, you can use it, or just put everything in front of the amp because the amp is not distorting. You're good. You'll just have to use overdrive pedals or other things to get a saturated sound that way, but many do that, and it's awesome. This came under my comment time 14, the previous Q&A video, where I was explaining that I can only fall in love with guitars that sound great unplugged as well, because I figured out over the years that those guitars that sound balanced and nice unplugged will work with pretty much any pickup. And if it's the other way around and they sound too dull or too tinny or whatever, unplugged, then it's really hard to find pickups that work with that guitar. More about that later. It's illogical how many guitar players think they have a doctorate of physics and are certain that things happen exactly how they think things happen. The vibrations through the wood make the strings vibrate more or less, blah, blah, blah. It's absolutely hilarious how often I see it. Listening to this nonsense just proves how widespread it is, and it's not even proven science that gets repeated by everyone. They repeat things because they agree with how they think things work. That's it. They hear some theory for some other guitar player and they agree that they think that's how the vibrations work with the strings, pickups, etc. Not even actual science. SMDH. It's absolutely ridiculous and it needs to stop. It's not 1950 anymore. We can prove and disprove these things today. People should be more worried about that than repeating theories with no basis in science. I told this earlier once in one of my comment time videos. I do believe in science. I do believe it's very important to have all those clever people figuring out stuff and making our life safer and easier and try to make our lives better if possible. But when it comes to guitar tone, I don't care too much about science. I'm sorry. All I care about is what I hear and how it makes me feel. And that is because this is about playing music, which is subjective and packed full of emotions and creativity and with not a lot of science, to be honest. When it comes to melodies, which is a good melody or not, when it comes to tone, which tones do I enjoy and which inspire me or not, I don't really care about anyone else's opinion, to be honest, and mostly not about science, what they measure. So if I tell you the story of my old Les Paul, this 90s Les Paul, where I literally put, I don't know, 7, I counted the pickup swaps until 7, and then I stopped counting because I was so pissed off. Nothing seemed to work. Subtle things changed, for sure, of course, but that issue that I had with the guitar, with not being enough open, airy, no nice bloom to the notes. These are things that only picky guitar players or, well, maybe some guitar players who don't play a lot of gain and pay attention to these kind of things will notice. It just didn't work and nothing changed. So what else could be responsible for that, if not the wood? I changed literally everything. The tuners, the pots, the capacitors, the bridge, the pickups, even removed the finish on most of the guitar. Like I removed the finish on the neck first, then on the backside of the body, because I wasn't sure if that's sucking out, I don't know, dampening the whole guitar. I don't know. Nothing changed. So go figure that out. I don't repeat fancy words of other guitar players just because I trust them and yeah, they have to be right. I don't question it, you know, it's like that. I'm not that kind of person. I'm a very skeptical person and I'm a very realistic person. What I see and what I hear and what I can tell for myself that it's true is what I believe. So it's totally fine to disagree. Just if you have the chance to try these things out in praxis, just do it. And don't only rely on theory and on rules of science and whatever, because sometimes real life tests prove different things. And that's pretty interesting. This is from Adam Martinek and came under my last comment time video, and he's asking about this guitar and Les Pauls. Hey man, first a big thank you from Niagara Falls, Canada. I have a burning question all about your Les Paul. I just got into LP style guitar world and I really need your help. My Les Paul won't stay in tune. I don't want to put thicker strings. My guitar has a decent spec to it and I like my guitars to play smooth, easy with 946 I don't usually go up string gauges from that. How do you keep the damn thing in tune so well? I'm using an unsung Canadian Les Paul, the Golden LG, same Gibson short scale, and it really is not holding tune despite the Grafdeck Tusk nut that it came with and the Schaller tulip style Clusen tuners. Almost every time when I whack a big G chord or play a fast lick followed by a big bend, it falls out. Well, if your guitar doesn't stay in tune, especially like a 3 left, 3 right headstock, there are two parts of the guitar that are mostly responsible for not having a proper like stable tuning. The first is obviously the nut, the second is the bridge and the bridge saddles, most importantly. The tuners in most cases are not the reason for the problem. Of course, there are some ones which are too loose or not, I don't know, the quality is not good enough. But if we're talking about Schallers, even if they're Venice style tuners like I have on my guitar, these are as simple as they can get, they have to work normally perfectly, should not have any issues. The nut, first of all, the slots should be wide enough for the strings, not too wide, but exactly wide enough. You can test that by picking up the string, like try to go underneath the string with your fingernails and try to pick it up while it's under tension. You can, if it's impossible, you can of course reduce the tension, like detune the string just one full tone or something like that, and try to pick the string up. If it comes up without this click, like it doesn't pop out, it just lifts up simply, then there's no tension around the string, which means that the string can slide through and doesn't hang anywhere. That's very important. And another thing that's very important about a nut, especially if you have issues with the D and the G string, the two center strings, you have to make sure that the nut slots are slightly fanned to point to the tuning peg, right? So this is the D string, and as you can tell, hopefully, the string doesn't run straight through the nut, but it's more in an angle, a slight angle, and then the string leaves the nut and goes to its machine head. Same thing for the G string. Especially these two strings should have a slight fanned carving or like slot. That's very important. And when people start complaining about Gibson guitars not holding tuning and yeah, of course, this design comes from acoustic guitars. It's very traditional and there are more ideal headstocks where the strings just run completely straight and parallel up until they reach their tuner, which is fine, of course, but this can also work. And if it doesn't work, it's not the design's fault only, it's because it's not set up as well as it could be set up. And the other part is the bridge saddle. On some Tune-O-Matic style bridges, you will find a pretty much V-shaped carving for the string. So right here, where the string sits, there's like a little V-shaped slot in the middle of the saddle. And if you have that, that can cause issues that the string's winding can hang in there on that straight V-shaped wall. I cannot simulate it with fingers. It's just nothing looks similar enough to understand what I mean. I hope you understand what I mean. If not, please let me know in the comment section. What I do on all my guitars and all the guitars I have in my hands in the workshop is I grab a fitting gauge nut file. Like if it's a 9 to 46, then you of course start with a 46 gauge nut file and carve the bridge to that string shape. Of course, you have to stick to the proper gauge for that string, and then round the edges off that you don't break strings. There's nothing rough about the saddle, and with that you don't have any issues even with a Bigsby tremolo. Like I have Bigsby on two of my guitars. One of them has a Tune-O-Matic style bridge, the ES330. I play every now and then on my videos, and I don't have a lot of issues with the guitar, even though it has a Bigsby, which is infamous for being really, really unstable tuning wise. So I think these two things should sort out your guitar. I cannot think of anything else that could cause that problem. Make sure that the knot slots are fine, and make sure that the string saddles carving per string has the right gauge and it's round. It's like a little lens basically, and it's not this V-shaped thing. Unfortunately, you'll see a lot of those. This next question is from Guillaume Boda. Oh, Kris, you are the reason I was weak and ordered this guitar. He's talking about this guy, the Fusion 2 Silver Sparkle. I'm enjoying it for the last week or so, and I'm very happy with it. I have a question though. What kind of product do you use to condition the fretboard? I see all kinds of opinions on the net about roasted maple, lemon oil or not, polish, fast fret. I would really appreciate your opinion on this and what you have been doing with this axe since you purchased it. Keep on the good work on your channel and on the Tomon channel. Thanks a lot. First of all, if we're just talking about roasted maple, it has benefits. That's why they do the roasting process. It's way more stable than normal non-roasted maple, and it doesn't really have to be oiled at all. At least that's what most companies and most, I don't know, sources of information will say. I would still oil it just to make sure that humidity, moisture, sweat just don't mess up things. I don't know. I might be a bit too skeptical. Probably I should just believe them, but it just feels better if I just seal the wood with, at least with oil and maybe even wax at the end, just to make sure that it's protected. But when we're talking about the Fusion 2, these guitars are finished. This looks like it's not finished. It's like bare wood. It is finished, so you don't have to do anything with it. I mean, you can of course grab a slightly moist cloth and just go over it, or take one of those guitar cleaners, you know, the sprays, put it on the cloth and just wipe it off to make it nice and fresh again. But you don't have to protect the wood. You don't have to maintain it or anything. Okay, so even if the fretboard is maple, just like here, this is a finished surface. You don't have to protect it from anything because it's sealed. Next one is from Michal Yandera. Nice work, Kris. These mod series are awesome content. A question, maybe for comment time. Do active pickups have any benefits or difference to classic passive ones? I would say personally that it is one more thing to worry about, because if the battery dies, you're out. That's true. I know exactly what you mean, and I'm also a passive guitar player, like passive pickup player. I absolutely understand that it's annoying to have to think of it like, okay, how charged is my battery, or how old is my battery? Do I need to change it? Whatever. So of course, it's one more thing to think about. So you're absolutely right. You could, of course, argue and say like, okay, whatever, does it change a thing? Because you have to think about the battery state in your body pack if you're playing a wireless system, or if you have like an in-ear monitoring system. Those will have body packs which will need batteries. Or if you also sing and you have a wireless mic, you need to think of that too. So does it change anything to have to think of one more thing? Or it's lots of batteries and rechargeable batteries anyhow all over you when you're about to play a show or a rehearsal. So it's up to you if you can live with it or not, I guess. What I like about rechargeable batteries, especially this one, this Fishman one, is that it shows how empty it is or not. If it starts to blink in a way, you know, okay, I need to charge it soon. But there are also other good things about active electronics. They're, in most cases, at least in my opinion, way less noise sensitive. Like, especially if we're talking about singer coils, like the Music Man Luke, which used to have one humbucker and 2 singer coils, all 3 EMGs and active. Those are basically noiseless singer coils, and they do sound great. Like, they don't sound like a metal guitar, obviously. So that's something you should consider if noise and hum is something that keeps on bugging you. Active pickups are pretty resistant and can sound great with basically the least amount of noise. Okay, so this is very interesting. It's about effects loops again. Greg H. Kris, I got a question. Can an FX loop return be used as an auxiliary in, an aux in, for MP3 players, cell phones, etc.? I'm planning to buy an amp without an aux in, and I use backing tracks very often. Need your gear tech wisdom. Well, it's not wisdom, it's just some experience. This will not work. I can tell you that right away. And here's why. The FX loop is a loop. What a surprise. If you just plug your MP3 player straight into the return, everything that's in the amp in front of that FX loop will be muted. Your guitar plugged into the input, whatever. So if the FX loop works as a loop, as it's supposed to be, which means that your guitar is plugged in, of course, in the input, and then from the send of the FX loop, you go into some sort of an effects pedal or unit, whatever. You go in there with the send, and then you go with that signal and return to the amp with the FX loop return. That's how the loop works. That's how you have your signal flowing from the input to the speaker, and right in the middle is this FX loop. It literally needs to be a loop. Otherwise, if you just plug something in the return, all the things in front of it, your guitar input, the preamp of the amp, all of that will be muted. I highly recommend using another speaker for your backing tracks. You can get one of those pretty affordable small Bluetooth speakers, or it doesn't even have to be Bluetooth one, but that makes things easier if you're using your cell phone. But those small portable speakers, you can put that on top of your guitar amplifier and have your backing tracks there. Then it's the same experience as if everything came out of the same box, like the guitar amp, and it will sound better because electric guitar amps just have mid-range. They don't have bass, like real bass. They don't have any proper high end. So they will sound like this if you put your backing tracks through your electric guitar amplifier. So it makes way more sense to use like a full range speaker for your backing tracks and your guitar cab or combo for your guitar tones. This one is from Donny Seti. Hey Kris, I really like your videos, és nem csak azért, mert magyar vagyok. Hello. So what I would like to know is whether this special pre-built wiring, like the Emerson, does make the sound better, fatter, and cleaner or not. Can the difference be sensible or audible? This is a big dilemma for me at this point regarding the humbuckers, just like the 50s versus modern wiring. Oh man, we could talk about this until everyone else falls asleep. The short answer is yes, they do matter a lot. Electronics make almost as big of a difference in tone quality as the pickups themselves. And they're way cheaper normally. The little longer answer is it of course all depends on the rest of your rig. If you have a really nice amp that shows detailed differences between two guitars or two pickups or whatever, you will also hear a pretty big difference if you swap only the electronics to one of these pre-wired kits from the original lower quality electronics. The first big difference you will see is that there's a way smaller tolerance, like plus minus 5% or whatever the percentage is, if you buy one of these pre-wired kits compared to like some basic pots and basic capacitors. So that's already great. Second of all, it's gonna be wired in a professional way and saves you a lot of time. And if you're not experienced with your soldering iron, well, it saves you some stressful moments as well. Toffer Taylor. Kris, do you have any routines or riffs you've used to help build up speed? I'm not the right person to talk about speed in terms of guitar playing. I'm not very fast, I'm a bit sloppy, and I don't even care too much about that part because After many years of guitar playing and focusing on only technique and trying to become faster and more accurate and everything, I realized that it's not fun anymore. I didn't want to play guitar anymore because I was so focused on becoming the next John Petrucci or whoever. I still play a lot of guitar, but I use my scales and all my finger exercises to be able to do a lot of things, but I don't focus on becoming the fastest and most accurate player. So what I can tell and what worked for me, as long as I was into this whole speed picking kind of thing, is pretty simple. There's nothing new about it, and everyone says the same thing pretty much. Just pick whichever exercise or scale works for you or you want to focus on that day, and grab a metronome. Very important. Drum machine or metronome, something that keeps you on a certain BPM, and start relatively slow, like something you can easily play. Then increase the BPM and make it faster and faster, and stop where you feel that you are running behind yourself. Like you cannot keep up with the tempo anymore and you're not as accurate anymore, or you feel that you start using your muscles too much and you become stiff. Go back immediately, because that's just gonna mess up everything and will not help you become this fluid, super shreddy player. I mean, if you look at all those crazy shredders, it just looks all so effortless. And that's only possible if they stay loose. You know, they don't try to force anything. That's why as soon as you feel like you have to stiffen up too much to reach a certain BPM, go back immediately. And let's finish up with Poo Ninja's question. What do you use for a DI signal, and or the importance of having DI tracks when recording? Is just splitting my guitar with a mixer and sending it into my DAW unprocessed the same thing as a DI signal? About the last question with the mixer, if the mixer has a symmetrical output, nice words, I know. So you're using TRS jack cable, which is the stereo jack cable, or XLR to go into your interface, then yeah, that's basically a DI box, or it has the same effect as if you were using a DI box. What would I use DI signals for? Well, if you want to reamp your playing, like let's say you can record a few songs at home, but you cannot crank an amp at home and you don't have the mics and you'd have, you know, that's just not an option. Well, then you can sort of record a DI signal, use a plugin just to have fun while you're recording. And then later on, you can reamp the DI signal, right? Because it's an unprocessed, completely dry and original guitar signal without any effect on it. You can reamp it later on. You can put plugins on it later on. You can do whatever you want later on, which is a very nice and very practical recording method, basically. If I'm recording bass, for example, which is something I do a lot, I have a preset on the AUX where one side of the AUX has two outputs. One output will give me just a DI box output, like no cab simulation, nothing. And the other side is gonna be 4x10 Fender Bassman cab with some nice mics in front of it. So I have two tracks. One is a DI, the other is an amp simulation. And that works perfectly because I can use those two bass tracks for different frequencies. I can compress one or compress the other and leave the other alone, or I can distort one of those tracks and still have a very articulate bass attack, like string attack when I pick. So that works, and I would definitely recommend doing that if you're recording bass. So if you're a bassist, yes, do it. Just grab a DI box, split the signal, maybe go through an amp, and the other output is just going to be a straight, direct DI out. Thanks for watching this video, even though it turned out to be really long. Yeah, you guys have some fantastic questions, and I'm really struggling to stay focused and answer them in a very compact way because I have all these thoughts popping up and all these examples and everything. But yeah, whatever. Thank you so much for sticking around and watching this. If you made it this far, you deserve 2 thumbs ups and likes and everything from me. You guys take it easy. We'll meet next Thursday again with a new video, but we'll see each other down there in the comment section.
I'll be back.
Bye-bye.